Hello, my name is Brian Burnham, and this is Module 12, a case study for EDL 854. I do want to say on the front end, I'm having a little trouble getting the 15-minute time limit that this program is allowing me, so I'm going to go a little fast. It's not intentional, I promise. All right, summary. What are the facts? My name is Carl Santos. I'm the principal of Briardale Elementary School. I'm confident in my job, including managing a budget. Myself, along with the other employees from the district, support the use of Briardale Elementary School for community events that needs room for 1,000 or more people. Briardale Elementary is an elementary school K through 5 with an enrollment of 600 students. We're one of 6 elementary schools in the district. We have 2 middle schools, 1 high school. Most teachers are happy in our district. There's very little turnover in terms of resignations or transfers to other districts. Other facts: funds that support curriculum programs that are allocated are done so by the superintendent, and fundraising for supplementary items must be done by each individual school. Each school has a foundation, and it helps the school raise money. Competition is stiff amongst the foundations of each school. Foundations are chaired by a parent representative. They also serve as the foundation president. The funds that are raised by the foundation are handed over to me as a principal. Typically, I agree with the foundation's suggestions, but to follow protocol, I always forward these recommendations to the school site curriculum committee, which is led by one of our lead teachers here at Briardale. Parents are very supportive of the supplemental programs that are funded by the foundation, like art, music, and foreign language. Other facts: Mr. Barely, who is a new parent to the area, has been elected president of the Briardale Foundation this year. He's a Harvard graduate. He's supportive of school programs that are in place already, the art, music, and foreign language. However, he wants to raise more money, the most if he can, in the district, because he has ideas for new innovative programs that could be offered on top of what he currently has. He's also motivated to beat a former fraternity brother, Mr. Morley, who is the president of another foundation at an elementary school in the district. It must be noted that Mr. Barely lost the Harvard class president campaign to Mr. Morley while they were in college. I think that's important to note, that there's a rivalry there. Mr. Barely continued. I sat down with Mr. Barely in an orientation type manner. I explained his job as a fundraiser. I explained his role as the president of the Briardale Foundation. I also went over his responsibility to meet with the school site curriculum committee and inform them of any ideas that might influence the supplementary curriculum programs. I stole this quote from the case study narrative. It just talks about directly how he came to the conclusion of running a raffle for cash type event. He took the idea of selling raffle tickets to the foundation. They, along with myself, were in full support of the raffle. After tickets were sold and on the night of the event, a drawing was supposed to be held at Briardale Elementary School. Myself and the community gathered for what was supposed to be one of the most successful fundraisers in the history of Briardale. Someone had tipped off the sheriff of this event that a raffle for cash event was being held at Briardale. We don't have any proof or know exactly, but I have a feeling it was probably Mr. Morley. I don't know that for sure. Never says. Mr. Barely was asked by the sheriff to accompany him to the sheriff's station. He was booked and released. Later in the week, he was convicted of a misdemeanor and placed on probation for his role in the raffle for cash event. I am personally embarrassed as the raffle for cash event, along with the budget debacle, ended up in the local newspaper. The Briardale Foundation was left with a poor optic in the eyes of the community. Legal and ethical issues. It's my job as the administrator to identify what is both legal and ethical, make the best decisions for all our students and staff in the building. Though no one was hurt or harmed by the fundraiser Mr. Barely conducted and that I approved, I should have known that it's illegal to hold a raffle for cash event as a fundraiser because raffles are considered games of chance and typically must be regulated in some way like a lottery or sports betting. Was there anybody harmed by this action? Yes, in terms of his record. Mr. Barely was in fact harmed because he ultimately was arrested and charged with a misdemeanor offense due to the raffle that he planned. Was there a breach of contract or any actions that were discriminatory or constituted harassment? I don't think so, not in this case. Also, it's my job as a principal to know the laws and board policies that regulate fundraisers. If I had any questions or doubts about whether or not this fundraiser was appropriate, I should have asked the superintendent, who's heavily involved in allocating funds to each school's budget, as it is. So he would be well aware of the parameters and the policies. I also recognize the complexity of legal and ethical standards when it comes to scenarios like this, but outside of there not being anything clear cut and written in terms of specifics for fundraising activities not being raffles, I should have known that the state and or federal laws that are in place and how raffle for cash events, are basically considered gambling. It's always my job to be able to know all potential flaws with the plan and recognize if something isn't right within that plan. I do think it's important to note that we're giving no board policy or laws stating that it's illegal to hold a raffle for cash fundraiser. However, I should have known, like I said already. I'm simply going off research that we learned through this class, knowing that information. And also, if there was any question at all, like I said, I should have contacted the superintendent. It must also be mentioned, with the above statement being true, we don't truly know if myself and or Mr. Barely are being rightfully accused here. Another thing a principal would need to worry about is what extra attention the situation will bring to Briardale. You have to think about things like background checks, which ultimately are a good thing. I think that's fine if they're a little bit more extensive than what we've had in the past. However, I may have some individuals on staff that I'm aware of any transgressions they may have, for example, like a DUI or something like that. But once a background check is implemented, if a reporter gets a hold of that information and it gets reported, then they would be embarrassed. And, I think that's a risky thing that needs to be acknowledged. Also, there's going to be an updated and change to board policy and procedure. We need to be aware of those. Update or change to a state policy. Maybe this brings enough publicity that something happens at the state level. And then any political fallout or involvement that possibly might occur from like the mayor of the town or something like that. Because clearly Mr. Santos is going to be reprimanded and there needs to be some sort of punishment for his role as well. The principal myself would need to be prepared for any updates or changes, how leadership is going to be chosen for the foundation moving forward, if foundations are even allowed to be used. Superintendent and or the Board of Education may dictate that they are going to choose the leadership for the foundations, or it needs to be decided in a different way. All right, synthesize and summarize the scenario. Basically, Mr. Barely has been arrested and convicted of a misdemeanor, basically for doing his job, as was asked of him by me. Because of as the building principal, I did not inform him of the legalities or the violations thereof, of having a raffle for cash fundraiser for the Briardale Foundation. It's, it ultimately falls on me. It's no probably. It falls on me, and I hate that, Mr. Barely is the one that ended up, being the one that's in trouble for it. All right, we've talked about the people involved. I've read all these. Make sure I mentioned the superintendent, the parents that are super supportive. There's a mystery person that made an anonymous tip. We talked about that possibly being Mr. Morley. I have him listed as well. And then the sheriff, he was, talked about briefly as the guy that, took Mr. Barely down to the station. The place is Briardale Elementary School. We talked about the fact that they're one of 6 schools located in the center of town in the middle of a diverse community. It serves as the town's community meeting center. Typically, they use the school for events that need more than 1,000 people to watch. And then it's a public school, grades K through 5. The school curriculum focuses on basic skills with educational instruction as objectives being based off of student performance at each school. Things that we don't know: racial demographics, sources of political power, specifics to the curriculum, makeup of the Briardale or any other schools, districts as well. Not that would be really pertinent to this, case study, but it's still information we're not aware of. Okay, review and prioritize the information. I'm completely embarrassed by what's occurred. It made the local paper. It's something that no principal ever wants to go on with their school. If you're on the front page, it's typically probably for something bad, unless you've won a state championship or something in a sport. Mr. Barely's also in a tough place because he's coming out of the situation with a criminal record. What information do I still need to know? Like I said, I still need to know, and I want to know more information that's going to be given than what's listed in this case study about the legalities of the fundraiser of this type. Obviously, raffle for cash events are not a good idea. However, they're not illegal as long as it's a 50-50 raffle and the people, the fundraiser themselves are a nonprofit organization. So, if they qualified, then this could have all been avoided. Obviously, the best plan of attack would have been to, not do this at all, just not have this event. But I think it's important to note that they're not illegal necessarily unless there's a board policy written. I also think it's important to note that I'm not sure we have enough information to truly make a decision. But as I said, the idea of a raffle should have been eliminated by me from the beginning because it's gambling. Okay, who should have been involved? Obviously, Mr. Santos, myself should have consulted the superintendent. Also, the foundation members and the bookkeeper should have been informed. Because of the chances of a cancellation of the event occurring, we'd have to go a different direction. The impact of this debacle playing out, there's obviously embarrassment on multiple levels. Principal's reputation, school reputation, parents' reputation, and the potential loss of jobs for the supplementary classes that are no longer going to be funded. Option 1, take no action. I don't like this one. Everything plays out the way it did. Obviously, that's the wrong choice. Option 2 would be to take extreme action. You can read here everything that would take place with there. There'd be a lot of new things moving forward, which would not necessarily be a bad thing. But I think you're running the risk of having a lot of litigation, or not litigation, but things that are involved and going on that make it very difficult moving forward for things to run smoothly. And then the third option would be to trust my instincts. Logical assessment of an educational leader's options allows them to weigh both ethical and legal ramifications, evaluate their decisions, and model the decision-making process to demonstrate sound quality leadership. That's what I would try to do in implementing my option, which would be option 3. My first gut reaction would be to gather more information, confirm what the district policy says about fundraising and the types of activities that are approved to already be done. I would ask Mr. Barely to pick another one, just go a different direction. Because we do not know the exact policy in place, and because Mr. Barely ultimately does get arrested, it's safe to assume there are legalities involved. Therefore, just picking a different activity would be the easiest way to go. Some non-negotiables for me would be the fact that I will meet with the district for guidance on the issues as a whole before, during, and after. I'm also going to make sure the policy and procedure will be revised, or at least acknowledge that it needs to be revised. And then I want to make sure that all money raised, had it played out the way that it did, the way it was given to us, was returned in a timely and correct manner. Okay, we talked about the evaluating of options. You can pause this and read. I don't think there's any pros or cons to the first option. Pros and cons to the second listed. The pros: stakeholder communication improved, new policy procedures would result, and the potential for the entire system to be cleaned up with new background checks. The cons: supplemental programming more than likely would be cut, at least for a year. Dissolution of parent ran and led organizations, and the background checks could release information not pertinent to this situation, but private to some of my employees. Option 3, pros: Mr. Barely doesn't get arrested and convicted. School continues to have the community's trust, and we avoid all the embarrassment that we talked about. There'd be better communication with the district, and also new policies and procedures written to avoid the situation in the future. Option 3 is the best because it allows me to go with my instinct, gather more information, ultimately choose a different path for our fundraiser to go. This decision allows Mr. Barely to avoid doing something that's going to get him a criminal record. It also shows improvement will be made because our policy is unclear and needs to be updated, as well as opens communication between myself, the district, and the community that will grow trust as we move forward. Finally, this decision allows all stakeholders to feel secure because communication lines are open, everyone's on the same page, in our little slice of heaven community that we continue on as normal. Implementing my decision, obviously I have to choose my path. This is not only the best option, but I believe it's the easiest one to implement. You can read the rest of my choices. I'm running out of time here. Contemplate what could happen, and then the people that would need to know. It'd be my job to make sure Mr. Barely understands the ramifications if a new fundraiser was chosen. And then the program standard and integration is right here. Thank you.